But we are live now, so let's get rolling. I'm excited for today's conversation because I've been a fan of yours for some time now. And as I was mentioning before we went live, you are a very unique writer. Some of the accounts that I love on Substack get me fired up. They have me think about mindset, maybe in business and leadership. But like motivate me or have me go a certain way, typically with energy. Whereas other accounts bring me peace. They have me settle down, appreciate the now, and you definitely fall into that category. So, like other writers like Eric Hogan or Jesse McEntee, that I prefer to read your pieces in the morning when I have a little bit of solitude next to a cup of coffee,
Yep.
and it just brings appreciation to life in a unique way, but very differently from Eric and Jesse. You all write on similar aspects of nature, of fatherhood, of life, but you have a very unique style that breaks up thoughts and weaves it into the moment in your life and different lenses that you're looking through, whether it's fatherhood, whether it's around your home, which it sounds like. I don't know if you live on a ranch or like you're a big homesteader. It sounds like you're doing all these amazing things. I want to come stay at the Tamposi bed and breakfast.
Right.
But I'd love to know about kind of just how you evolved, not only your writing style, but just as a writer in general.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that those kind words. I've taken probably a more contemplative approach to writing, and it goes well in the morning, which is why I send it early East Coast time at least. But that's it. This is what it is. But and to answer your question, I don't live on a ranch. But when I first started writing my Substack, which was like I don't know 4 or 5 years ago, I had like nobody read it. It was literally me. I didn't invite anybody. I didn't make it public. And I thought it'd be funny to, like, do this "How we doing?" One, it's like a pun, "How you doing? How we doing?" But just tie everything into, like, cowboy jokes and cowboy puns and ranch puns. And some of that it is like, if you, like, started the early posts, like, they're not as literary, I would say, as they are now. But I've kept some of these same puns because, like, at this point, my wife, my mom reads it. I have some friends who have seen the kind of evolution, so we keep some of these in jokes, so to speak, and then, branch it out. But no, I started writing my Substack, like I said a while ago, and it came to me literally like I woke up one morning and I was thinking about food, red sauce, like pasta with red sauce. I was like, oh, it would be really funny to start a newsletter where every week I posted a recipe about red sauce. And then I started going through and I was like, oh, that would be kind of tough. You could do, tomato sauce, ossobuco, crabs, right? Tomato soup. But I'd run out of that. So I said, okay, I'm going to do some recipes and just write them, very quickly, again, to nobody at this point, just to myself, because I've always enjoyed writing, right? I majored in English because I like to read, I like to write. That was the reason I chose it. And kind of after college, after being in the workforce and doing different things, you realize there's not that many opportunities for a creative outlet. I wasn't writing as much. I wasn't kind of flexing that side of my brain. So it's like, hey, I'll do this, and it has since evolved. And now I find it's a good balance to some of the more analytical things I do, or more physical things that I'm doing. You try and build that balanced approach to life, and that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, I learned some of this in your conversations with Jeff Lund, and I love that you guys are doing a monthly podcast now because you guys just have great banter, similar overlaps in your lives with when it comes to how you eat, how you live, how you parent. So that's going to be a fun podcast to keep listening to. But your original account, it was titled Red Sauce Only.
It was like red sauce only for the 2 minutes, and then I was like, I'm gonna switch it to how we doing because I like that pun. So
Gotcha.
people were like, why is it "How we doing?" Like, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, well, say it out loud, right? And that might make more sense.
I liked it right away when I saw that. I got the and then you see the humor in your post without me knowing the inside jokes.
Yeah.
That's cool that you do that. I do that in presentation. So like when I'll
Yep.
talk at a conference, I'll have some friends there and they'll insert some words or some things for me to say to make it a challenge, just to
Yep.
make it interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, very cool. So if you don't mind me asking, you do this for a hobby just like I do. It overlaps with some of the stuff that I do in the military. It's obviously we're both passionate with what we write
Yep.
about, particularly when you start talking about family, other aspects of how we live. What are the more analytical things, physical things, or things that you do professionally?
Yeah. Professionally, I work in real estate development. So kind of I joke with people, right? It's the polar opposite of sometimes the outdoors where in many cases real estate development is the changing of nature to development, and I spend a lot of time thinking about how to balance, that in my life, but try and only do projects that are less destructive or whatever you wanna call it, but it's something it's an interesting, right, to because I really do enjoy real estate, but I also really enjoy, how to think about using land more closer to how it should be done. So yeah, I haven't figured out the right way to talk about it yet, but it's interesting, right? Another intellectual challenge.
Always evolving. So
Yeah,
that's something to contemplate more and more, and maybe it'll come across in your writing.
yeah,
You mentioned you've always liked to write and read. So were you writing obviously to yourself before you even went to school for English?
yeah. I grew up and we had a very reading focused family. Books everywhere. We were constantly reading, and writing to the extent where You know, I I've never really kept a journal, but I had like, when Blogger was really popular, early blogs, just writing, things, stories, just random thoughts. And then in college, I started a website that was like, if this would probably either date me or make people hate me, but Barstool Sports, right, was huge, when I was in college. So I had for on our campus, I started a website that was basically a knockoff of a Barstool, but specifically for our small college campus, was doing writing in that way. And then, but that wasn't you know creative writing or stretching your muscles type writing. It was like, look at these, sorority girls who are doing dumb things, or look at these fraternity guys who completely embarrass themselves. So I've since, realized that I enjoy maybe the literary aspect more than the just writing itself.
Yeah, and writing in public, which I didn't realize you've been doing for some time, no matter what the medium, that's a different skill than writing to yourself. And
Yeah,
there's overlap between the two, but that was something that I came to realize. And I'm glad for my first 8 months on Substack, I was just kind of posting and ghosting,
yeah,
just putting it out there. Of course, I would check metrics, and it didn't take too long because I had none. And I don't look
yep,
too much
0,
into.
yep, 10, cool.
Oh, my mom liked it. Good to go. But yeah, so like I don't look too much in engagement and metrics even to this day outside of the obvious things like comments and the
Yeah,
community aspects of the different threads that you're involved in. You see the likes and stuff, whatever. But there's so many analytics you can look into. But just the skill of being willing to share your perspectives in whatever way you're writing, even if it's silly college stuff, writing or doing anything in public is much different than doing it privately.
yeah,
Um, so that's cool that you've been in that arena for a while, and it probably influences why you can write in the way that you do with some of the perspectives that you have. And I titled today's conversation "Radical Presence" because it really appears that, which is uncommon, it seems these days, that you have a unique skill of just noticing things. The way you and you obviously you're a very talented writer to write what you notice.
like,
Eric Hogan's very good at this too on his
yeah,
backpacking. Jesse, I mentioned those two very intentionally because all of you have that flavor in your writing of noticing these intricate details of nature, of your children, of your food, whatever you're writing on, and then describing it in these ways that, again, just as me as a reader, makes me fully present where I feel like I'm living vicariously through you in that moment because you paint a picture with your words. But that's only possible because of your ability to notice it and be fully present. Is this something that like you've had to build over time? Have you always been an observant individual?
yeah, yeah. I think it's something that and I've said this a lot about the stuff I write about, through my Substack is you almost have this like intention, like, oh, I'm going to start writing about noticing things, and then you start to notice more things, and it snowballs, and then you get better at it, and you practice that skill of noticing. So I would say I always tried to be observant. I think everybody does, right? You want to notice things. But the more I've been consciously doing it, the more I subconsciously do it. So there's that building. And then I read, and this is actually like, I don't know, a couple months ago. I there are a lot of writers I enjoy who write about things they notice, but I read, and I've mentioned this 1,000 times now, but Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, which is a phenomenal book, and it's about her noticing, right, over the course of a year, just noticing things that happen around her creek. And that kind of changed a little bit how I think about it. And then, E.B. White, who I wrote about this morning, he's very good at noticing things. So he's a huge influence on the way I write, and kind of combining all these pieces. But at the end of the day, it's, I can't remember if it's the Hemingway quote or one of them, but in order to be a writer, you need to live things to write about. And I think, if you're going to live it, you might as well notice it. So that's kind of the approach I take.
And I love your kind of way of framing it as a skill and talking about the more you consciously do it, the more you subconsciously do it. And that's true of any skill. Like we start off uh, unaware of the skills that we possess or do not possess, particularly the ones that we're not so good at. You don't even know you suck. So you're subconsciously incompetent. And then once you realize there's an opportunity, you become consciously incompetent. This is something that I can now work on. So the more that I train it, the more I can become consciously competent with noticing. But that takes focus just like any other skill. But then the more you do that, and it depends on the skill, it depends on the environment, it depends on the distractions, which is why I love thinking about presence and noticing as a skill because we live in a time where it is very easy to be distracted. Even
Yeah.
without the technology, you and I are parents of young children. So
Right.
I love writing because it forces presence in my thoughts. It makes me slow down in trying to articulate through the written word or typed word what my thoughts are. So it really slows me down in a way that I appreciate and brings presence and noticing of my thoughts. But then I have my kids that will disrupt any amount of flow.
Yeah.
And whether I get up early, try to stay up later, they
Yeah.
seem to like be secretly trying to figure out how to keep challenging me and make me better in disrupting that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, noticing is a skill like anything else. And the more you do anything, the better you get. And soon enough, it can become part of your thinking patterns and become subconsciously competent, which is mastery. But that's not a destination. That's a forever thing that you have to work to maintain and evolve upon.
Yeah. No, it's funny you're talking about like noticing and presence, and my desk overlooks a window, and I'm seeing like in the background all these like birds and bugs, like a dragonfly just flew by, and I'm laughing because there's a book. It's a conversation with Barry Lopez, who's another great writer. He's got a book Arctic Dreams, which is fantastic, and a bunch of other really really good books that blend kind of philosophy, nature, noticing things. But he talks about a tendency he's noticed among specifically like Inuit elders, and they will always have a conversation facing a window, and they know like everything something, so they'll break the conversation. Oh look, there's some geese over there, or like oh look that happened. So I'm gonna try my best not to point out every animal or thing that flies by the window, but there's that balance of noticing and also being present. I'll be present with you, Kyle. I won't. I won't be
I,
present
I
with the window.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah,
One of my favorite shows of all time is The Office, and what you
yeah,
just mentioned reminded me of Andy. What was his
yeah,
last name? Bernard.
yeah,
But they're talking Mallard.
yeah.
Throws a rock at it. But it's not. If you're gonna get distracted, being distracted by nature, other than like your cell phone buzzing, and of course, like the people you care about. I was doing a podcast last night, and I heard my daughter in the background. I have no idea if it came through the audio, but screaming in a way that I knew she wasn't injured. I knew she wasn't like just selling something. And I kind of guessed maybe my wife was pulling her tooth out. And sure enough, I come out. She's lost 4 teeth recently. She looks like a jack o' lantern right before Halloween. But it was, we are drawn to things that matter to us. And the more you can make nature, your family, and things matter to you, you will notice that more. Your brain wires itself to what you orient toward
Oh
and
yeah,
you can train that orientation.
yeah. Um, there's a book, the book Art of Racing in the Rain, right? If you've read it, it is fantastic, but it's about it's a dog's perspective on life. But he takes a very zen approach to it, and there's a quote I love from it. That which you manifest is before you. So if you're thinking about noticing things, your family, right, nature, those things are important. That's gonna as woo as it sounds, right? That comes into your life, right? And that's what becomes a priority. And I think that's my attempt, at least, to counterbalance the constant pings of, text messages or emails or like whatever advertisement, someone's trying to distract your attention. You need to manifest your attention in the places you want it to be. And
Yeah.
that's what comes out more.
And I'm kind of my own biggest distraction too. If it's not these technological notifications, it's my thoughts of like
Mm.
planning what's next. Always, my brain is very active, so I like these skills and or practices that require to slow down, even something as simple as sitting in the sauna and
Yeah,
focusing nothing on my breathing. So different forms of meditation, because I distract myself. I'm always either reflecting on something or preparing for something and planning the day with all the different activities we have. But man, like some of the best experiences in my life, and I know this, are when I turn all that off, when it
yeah,
is not truly urgent, and most things are not if there's not a physical threat in front of you, and just appreciate the present. And that's where the fulfilling experiences come from. That's where these beautiful moments that you can never truly plan for. Like I love planning experiences, but not to get through the experience, but just to be fully present
right.
at that different experience. And that's a different thing. I grew up, we'd go on vacations and you do this and you go on to that and you do the next thing. And don't get me wrong, fun. However, less objectives within the experience, more just being present at the one experience
Yeah,
and let life come to you rather than trying to force it. You write in a way to see that seems you have figured it out much more than I have. So I gain insight from your writing.
I appreciate
Have
it.
you been outdoors a lot growing up? Is this something that is more recent as far as your ability and that skill that you've trained to notice?
Yeah, I mean, I think like many, people who tend to gravitate towards writing about the outdoors, you grow up in the outdoors. I didn't grow up in a family that necessarily was we weren't taking camping trips. We weren't I didn't grow up hunting. I didn't really grow up fishing, but we were always outside, hiking as a kid. I grew up in an area where we would, the almost cliched at this point, but go out and like play till it was dinner time or time to go to sports practice or whatever it might be. So just spent a lot of time outside. And then kind of through college, when I was more setting my own agenda, the free time I had, we'd go for hikes or spend time outside. And a lot of it's done from fitness, Kyle, right? Like I swam through college. So fitness has always been like I it's important to me to do things physically. So when, if you spend 20 years staring at a black line in a pool, right, you want to get outside and see something different. So my wife, or girlfriend at the time, we started doing more trail running or hiking. I do it with my dad and my brothers. And then that shifted kind of in a confluence with getting more excited about eating and cooking, to thinking about where food came from. And that's how I got into hunting, which I picked up a couple years ago. And if we talk about like noticing things and when you're sitting in a tree stand for white-tailed deer, which is how I spend most of my time hunting, you're left with a lot of time for yourself thinking, right? You can't get distracted by, oh, I'm going to check, what's going on the internet. Because if you don't notice what's going on, a deer will walk right by you, or you'll miss a fox under a tree stand, or a hawk, right? Or something really, really cool that you need to be fully present for that. So all of these things converge and swirl into like one, like just be present. Everything kind of goes back to it.
Yeah, and you put yourself in those arenas that force that skill to be practiced, like you said, with hunting.
Yeah,
Funny story. The first doe that I got was with my brother-in-law, who grew up hunting, who grew up
yeah,
outdoors. He has that skill honed in. He has some high frequency hearing loss, but if we are outdoors, he will hear. I still have normal hearing, probably some minor damage just from exposures I've had, but he
yeah,
actually has hearing loss. Um, but when we're outdoors, that man has supernatural hearing.
yeah,
But we're sitting in the tree stand day 2, thankfully, because I used to be, like I feel like I was invincible,
yeah,
fearless with most things, including
yeah,
height for sure, just if anything, reckless with some of the stuff I used to do.
yeah,
Then I had children and, like, so much about me has changed since I became a dad, and, like, things like heights now make me a little cautious, and thank
yeah,
goodness day 1 was just me getting comfortable in that tree stand because it is a very basic tree stand, as I'm sure, you're aware of the different ones out there, so getting up there was a fun climb, and then sitting there just it was a unique experience for me. But day 2, um, this is still new for me, but I'm more comfortable. However, training the skill that is presence and noticing sounds or things in your environment to sit somewhere and just observe, whether you're dialed in on trying to detect a threat or an opportunity. That's easier said than done if this is not something you do. So what happens? My mind wanders.
yeah,
And I'm sitting there in my head planning my jujitsu lessons for the next month and kind of what I want to go over in class and the different systems I think I'm going to teach.
yeah,
When thankfully I'm with my brother-in-law who's, "Shoot, you hear that? Hear that?" And then before we even see it, 60 yards off through the brush. He has
Yeah.
heard the little leaves rustling, and beautiful doe walks out for my first kill. And yeah, so it was a funny lesson. I told him about it after. Yeah, like being dialed in, being present for 5 minutes
Yeah.
is something worth training. To be able to do it for time, a worthwhile practice for anybody, because you can miss a lot of life if you allow yourself to be distracted either externally or internally
Yeah.
if you have a racing mind.
Yeah. No, it's a, you and again, this is like one of those things, but you got to open yourself up to everything that comes in, right? You open yourself up to the universe, and that's when you notice things. That's when it comes in. The deer is a perfect example. I mean, those things can be silent as can be, but once you have tuned into a deer crunching on fallen leaves, like that sound rings, and it's different from a squirrel, and it's different from a chipmunk, and it's different from birds. It's different from a every animal has a different sound, and it's amazing that you can pick up on these things, and 99% of people don't, right? They walk through the woods like, "Well, where's all the nature?" Oh, dude, you just, like, you blew it away because 'cause you're stomping through the woods and it's hiding from you, but if you stop for a second, relax, breathe, you'd be amazed at how much goes on even when you think nothing's happening.
And as an audiologist, I can appreciate what you just said, because the different frequencies or pitches of sound and the spectrum of noise that you can hear when you just shut your brain off and pay attention to what's around you. Nature is truly beautiful. And whether it's different bird calls that you'll hear, it's another fun thing to do is hike with my
Yeah,
brother in law, who will pick up on the most distant bird call and be able to identify that just from its sound. Yeah, James Freitas, who writes on Substack, another one of my favorites, who writes about nature. And I mean, lame me. I was one of those kids growing up. If I didn't like it, I thought it was lame. But if I liked it, I thought it was cool. So like I thought birding was like this lame practice that people like who would
yeah,
ever want to go birding? James has made birding so cool for me by reading like how obsessed he is, and like I anything is cool if the person is passionate about it and puts their heart into it. And of
yeah.
course, he overcomes TBI. He goes deep into nature to get these shots, just like Eric does with his shots of sunset or different landscape. But when you put your heart and soul into these passions and you find different ways to make them unique for you and fulfilling for yourself and then share with others, that's cool no matter what the endeavor
Like,
is.
I'm gonna shift this just a little bit because I was having a conversation with a college kid who was reaching out to me about job advice. He's like, "Oh, what do I put on my resume?" I was like, "Dude, if there's something that like you're gets fired up about and you're passionate about and you can convey that, that to me is more powerful and more meaningful than someone's like, 'Oh, I have, great at Excel and I can, I know how to do a financial model.'" I'm like, "Well, everybody can do that. And if you can't do it, I could probably teach you if you got some level of like intellect. But to have a passion about something, whether it's birding, whether it's about, I don't know, flower collecting, whatever it is, like if you can speak about that and present about it and convey that, that is, I think, the secret sauce, especially, we could talk about AI, right? And how that affects our observation and the way we interact with the world. But if you don't have a passion about something, it doesn't mean anything, right? That's not something I don't think you can teach passion. So however that comes through.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I have a potty mouth at times, mostly for
Mhm.
humor, when I'm not emotional, and then I realize that's it triggers me to realize I need a trigger response to manage my emotions, because when I
Yeah.
start cussing emotionally, that's a problem. But so I like to tell people the most important attribute, that you can possess is giving a shit. And so
Mhm.
if you I love to know what people give
Wrote
a shit.
about in the parenting advice. It was give a shit. Parent like you give a shit.
The most important skill for parenting or really for living, like, if you wanna be good at something, you need to give a shit. You're not
Yeah.
gonna be exceptional in anything that you don't care about. So
Mhm.
finding what you care about is very important for fulfilled living, and then how you approach it, and we can talk about a lot of the things after you know what you care about, but I completely agree with you. I love to know what people are passionate about, because how can we take that passion and frame it for the position if we're talking about work, or if we're just talking about helping you live a more fulfilled life and thrive in the modern days. Like, let's cultivate that passion, that unique energy that you have in this endeavor. And because a lot of these concepts, whether it's resilience, presence, return on investment, eh, th- they overlap across domains. Specifically, we need to figure out what lights the fire in your ass. What are you passionate about? But when we understand that, or when we figure that out, and that requires living, just like with
Yeah.
writing, you got there. You're not going to figure that out in your chair. That's you may have thoughts come to you, but you need to get out there and actually develop that wisdom in the respective arena. But as you do that and you realize, yeah, this aligns with your soul in some unique way, here we go. So many opportunities from there.
Yeah, and I think that alignment is so important because it's so easy to look at, especially with like social media. Someone's like, "Oh, like I'm gonna live exactly how that guy's doing it, and I'm gonna he's crushing it or she's crushing it. I'm gonna crush it if I do those things." But it doesn't work that way, right? You've got to find what works for you. And I think if you don't have that alignment is a perfect word for it, or that foundation of yourself, like you're confident that, like, look, I enjoy writing, and I enjoy writing about things that may not be cool to everybody, but I think they're cool. I'm fine with that. I'm fine sharing that in public. But if you're anxious, you're like, oh, like I really like, and I'm going to use birding just because that's what we've been talking about. Like, I really like birding, but I all thought that was a nerdy thing to do. It's lame to talk about birds, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and be about jujitsu because jujitsu is awesome, right? I'm going to rear naked choke somebody. You could maybe fake it, but it's not going to come through in the same way. So I think that alignment is like the perfect word, right? And
Yeah.
it's a you gotta have that. If you don't have it, you're in trouble, I think. At least if you wanna be, aligned in your li
Yeah, and the sad thing is, like, you bringing it back to technology is you can get fooled real quick if you do imitate or if you do what brings you these false metrics of popularity,
Mhm.
with likes, with trending thing. There are there are accounts that give you the templates to use AI or not to make something that's trending, to engage the masses in a respective domain. Like that's something that again you don't even have to care. You can be trained on how to do that and become a ghostwriter or writer and do pretty well metrics wise when it comes to likes and different forms of engagement. There may not be any quality to that. But most importantly, I like to think of every action as having some selfless component, but also selfish component. Most
Right?
importantly, selfishly, it's not going to align with your soul. It's not going to be meaningful for you. And over time, you're going to get lost from your true self. And I love to talk about the skill of authenticity.
Yeah.
And there's different things to help determine what your values are and how your actions are aligned with them. But I think a mark that I've been missing, like in different speeches I've given or even my writings lately, is what we're talking about right now. Like there is a wisdom component there that has to come from experience to
Mhm.
where whatever those values that you think you have, you won't know it and when it comes to your actions and your endeavors until you get out there and you really creatively just experiment
Yeah.
and through process of elimination figure that out too. So values are separate from the actions that you take, you want those to be aligned, but also like the arenas that you're taking those actions, whether it's wildflowers, birding, you name it, anything. There's no wrong answer to that what, but
Yeah.
then how you do it and the why, all of those overlap, and then there's the alignment in your soul. This what we're talking about right now is like making my brain spin quite a bit more, and like how can I involve like talking about the skill and training the skill as authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things, like, you gotta look at it from a sideways angle because you can't like, "Oh, you gotta be authentic." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm authentic," but how do you do that, right? You gotta look at it from these different ways, and I think approach it without trying like, you can't be authentic if you're trying to be authentic. It's that paradox, right? So many things. So when you figure it out, let me know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's you can't be authentic without failing at it a few times, but, yeah, I'm gonna have to sit on that a little bit longer for, like, ho the overlap between those different domains on I mean, but also, can you truly be authentic until your brain fully forms? I'm sure you can, but, like, I had all these things that I thought I wanna do as a kid or these different, groups or passions that I thought I had, but they were as fleeting as emotions. And like life is, of course, continuous evolvement, continuously reorienting and figuring out new paths that align with our values. Because I have this core values exercise I like to do with people, and I do for myself every year. That changes
Yeah,
annually, by the way, just due to different life demands and experiences that I have. So it's an ongoing process where I think authenticity is probably just removing external forms of input in many ways outside of I had a conversation recently on a podcast about external validation. And I was like, actually, I'm a big fan of external validation. We tend to shit on it quite a bit, but only with those that matter to you in your life. Like I want to
right.
make sure I'm getting external validation from my wife. If,
Yeah,
if I'm if I'm being authentic and it's not aligning with my family's values and I claim family is my number one value,
yeah,
which I still do, I'm not being quite authentic. I'm not showing up with my actions in the ways that I would want to. So there's that alignment outside of myself. But outside of that, when it comes to social media and all the different inputs we have, I think that's going to probably skew um, authenticity and what success really means for us. But again, you just hear me riffing right now. So much to think about on how to concisely talk about that skill. But it does come back, I think, to what you write so beautifully on is just presence in the moment and letting life happen with what you do have figured out while you're constantly trying to figure it out yourself, being a free thinker and noticing the things that matter most to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think about it, right? But especially with, like, our you have kids, I have kids. How do you how do you guide them towards authenticity without telling them you need to be authentic or you need to find what, resonates with you or what aligns in your life? You can't force a kid into alignment. They need to find it themselves. So it's as parenting, it's how do you set up the track or the guardrails where they can fail, they can find these things on their own, but they're also not finding something that they don't even realize yet might be detrimental. And it's tough, right? It's tough. That's the challenge of parenting, right? Is knowing when to step in and when to watch.
Yeah, never ending dilemma.
Yeah.
And of course, it's going to be age dependent based on the influences that maybe, whether it's peer groups of Jonathan Haidt, no one's better out there writing on the impact of technology and the great quote of when you want your kids to grow up, give them a smartphone. And that hits home so much. And my wife and I talk about that regularly. My oldest just turned 8, so we still have some time because we are
Yeah.
not going to be. She has friends that have their own smartphones already at 8 years old. Not happening for a long time. I mean, he recommends 16 years
Yeah.
old and
Yeah.
older.
Yeah.
And even then, like, it could still be a dumb phone. Like, I had a flip phone until I would think I was 25, 26 years old. Everybody
Yeah.
else made fun of me. I can't wait. I was actually talking to a buddy this morning. I cannot wait to go back to that one day. It's too convenient for all the different pockets and things in my life.
Be doing the Substack live if we didn't have our smartphone. It was like the
No, we
pivotal.
couldn't. I'll still have one, but I will table it, and it'll be scheduled for when I get to talk to Lou when we're in our 80s and still doing some Substack lives about presents at that point in our life and talking about our great grandchildren. But yeah, with like the lens of fatherhood and children and how do I raise them to be resilient, fulfilled individuals and the guardrails that you mentioned, like when do I hone in, when do I step back and let them live? In terms of authenticity, it definitely just trying to encourage experience. Anything and really removing like my idea of like I love jujitsu. You know this. I I encourage them to train. They go to the gym with me. That's their second home. They've been in that building more than any other building outside of our home since we've moved to Southern Maryland. They really have shown no interest in training. My son did a few classes. My
Yeah.
daughter was scared of it. James, who just turned 4, he'll probably love it. He acts like he will, but we'll see. But I've really checked myself to, hey, if you're not interested, no problem. But let's get out there and find something you are interested in. We'll give it a try. Then we pivot if you don't like it. But just continuously, whatever you think you like, I'm all about it.
Yeah. No, it's funny. My daughter just started jujitsu, and to get her off the wait list in the class, I started jujitsu in January, and I've been going with some consistency. I still suck. But she took a little break. She didn't really want to go. There was a girl in the class who was, a little older than her that was, pinning her in the kids class, and she got very discouraged. And then I was in a tournament last weekend, my first time competing, and, I got my butt kicked again, but, my daughter's like, "Oh, I wanna go to jujitsu now." And so she sees the way you're doing it, and it clicks, but you can't force it, right? I could tell her all the time, "We're going to jujitsu," but she doesn't wanna be there. She's not gonna get any benefit out of it at, 4.5 years old. Maybe you need to do a little more heavy hand as the kids get older. You probably know more at, 8 and plus, but it's so interesting how these things work. We're figuring it out.
I saw you in your post before last week and talk about jujitsu tournament, and I knew at least one of your kids was training, and I knew you had started training. I meant to ask you if it was your competition or your kids' competition. Lou, that is so cool that you took this on to motivate your children to do that, and you're willing to be a beginner in front of them. I think that's another opportunity to help our kids learn to experience different arenas in our life. And we like to show them our strengths. We like to show them how great we are all the time. And like not only admitting our mistakes when we mess up at home and just maybe raise our voice when we don't need to or misspeak in some way. Uh, my wife is so good at demonstrating the power of repair, but also just letting them see us fail, and I'm trying to actively do that more and more, not just let them see me do the things that I'm good at, but let them see me be a true beginner, because you can't get good at anything without sucking first, and the fact that you're willing to enter this new arena with your daughter so she can see that, I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to another way to help them eventually become authentic, because you're not gonna you're gonna imitate, you're gonna just go with the norm if you are afraid of being viewed as a failure. And I just talked to Ed Lattimore recently about external invalidation. Like a
Yep,
lot of us, he talks about most people don't feel failure. They fear other people seeing them fail. And so
yeah,
I was like external invalidation, and that
that's a
resonates so much.
yeah. It's, I just read one of my buddies sent me this. It's a book. It's the education of Cyrus, the Persian emperor, and his education growing up as a child. And one of the things that the author makes the point, it was actually a book review, but the author of the book review made the point that his, like, secret sauce was Cyrus was he sought out as a child things that made him fail, because that's how you go past that. And, as the, son of an emperor, son of a king, right? It's so easy to find success and people go out of the way, but he made it a point to fail in hunts and fail in training and do all these different things. So he knew how to push himself and also set an example for people around him, his peer group, that I can fail. It's okay for you to fail too. And I think that mindset is it's such a strong. I don't think we see a lot of that, right? Where you're embracing failure. It's easy to say, "Hey, I'm going to be awesome. I'm going to kick ass at this," but if you're also willing to embrace that it's okay to fail, that's a great lesson, right? To teach kids and frankly, a lot of adults too. that's a it's a good thing.
Well, you're not going to get better. You're going to get complacent if you're avoiding failure, even if you are a quote unquote expert. If you stop learning, if you try to stay safe at any level that you're at, jujitsu is such a great realm to look at it because we have the belt system, which belts typically they're supposed to indicate competency, but sometimes they just indicate quantity for how long you've been training. There's so many different shades of colors, if you will. There's so many different reasons why people train. But some, there's one guy in particular that I'm thinking about right now. He recently got his black belt, but at the time he was still a brown belt. He trains in one of the biggest gyms in the country, and I was a joke. He's the darkest brown belt I've ever experienced because he was so game, and any black belt I saw go against him, they struggled, if not got their
Yeah,
ass kicked. But he talked about one day that he was working on something called body lock passing, where you wrap your arms around somebody's torso, your head's down, you pin their hips, you can get around their legs. It was not part of his game. It was not his A game at all. And he was like, it is such an ego check. And I know this, but it's so hard because as I'm training this, I'm going to get tapped regularly by advanced white belts and blue belts. But that is the only way that I'll learn. If I'm not willing to do that in training, I'm never going to be able to do it in competition. I'm never actually going to become not even consciously competent, but definitely not subconsciously competent. So willing to fail not only individually but in public is how you're going to efficiently evolve that skill, and that's true of any domain.
yeah, yeah. And it's that we talked about it, right, with writing and noticing, but you got to be first conscious before you can be subconscious. And I think you need to be conscious that you will fail. And if you can't accept that, again, you lose alignment. It all comes back together, right? You gotta have that alignment in sense of authenticity in yourself too. So
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of the skills that we have, I,
yeah,
I don't want to say we're subconsciously incompetent, but it's less than ideal. It's probably subconsciously run, whether that is stress management and also noticing. Like again, sitting in the tree stand, I could have made that if I approached that day as an opportunity to train that skill and just at 4 hours, I'm gonna dial in. If I start thinking about jujitsu, just like meditation, if you start thinking about something, bring it back to what you're focusing on. I did not approach that day that way. I was just hanging out, enjoying it with Jesse, and then as we got quiet, I let my mind wander without the intention ahead of time of training that skill. But it requires, like you said, conscious effort for a while to make it eventually subconscious. It's such an important idea for anywhere that we want to improve.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a everything's a skill. You can train, and you talk about it all the time in your writing. You can train almost anything, and you have to be, I think, diligent about the things you choose to train, because if you're not consciously training it, you may be subconsciously training the wrong thing, or or unintentionally training the wrong thing.
You said it beautifully, 'cause if you're not constantly trying to improve, you're passively getting worse. And it just that is life and every plasticity in both directions. When it comes to, again, how it reads for me as a big fan of your work, it feels like you're a homesteader. It feels like you have a really cool setup where, like, not that you're completely self-sufficient. Because another thing I love about your writing is while you do focus on, how you get your food to feed your family and making it as natural as possible, and some other aspects of sustained living on your own and being independent and self-reliant, you also talk about community and other people that you meet in your area to maybe get the duck eggs from that you talked to Jeff about recently. But that's still, that is another skill within self-sufficiency, is being able to do things as a team, not only in your family but outside of it in your community. How close am I to me calling you? You don't want to label people, but I think the label of homesteader is awesome. Is that something that you and your family aspire to do?
I will set the record just straight. My sister-in-law, his joke, she's like, "Oh, you guys are gonna be full-on homesteaders." We are not homesteaders, right? We have a very much a hobby garden, right? I we But we're fortunate we live in a place where we can rely on that to get a lot of things, right? So we have a farm around the corner that we are part of a CSA, our community supported agriculture. So we get, during the growing season, most of our vegetables come from a farm that's a half mile away, right? I can get over there with relative ease, and we're over there all the time. We've talked about the duck egg lady, right? We get our eggs. My kids now don't even like chicken eggs. They're so attuned to duck eggs. They're like, "Why are these so small?" I'm like, "Oh, they're from." And she also raises lambs, so we'll get like a lamb from her every year. Since we started hunting, I've been fortunate to have, venison in the freezer for most of the year. But then also knowing whether it's, and I'm wearing the hat now, Northbridge or Bison, my now friend Matt Scoglin, who runs that ranch, it's in Montana. It's not local, but I feel very connected to what Matt is doing and his view on how to raise an animal that's not just good for him or for the animal, but also the land, the environment, and the whole ecosystem. So we get, meat from people we know, right? Whether it's a bison ranch in Montana or a farmer, in Rhode Island that's raising cows, on grass, and you can go and see them, and they're happy looking cows. That's how we homestead. But if there were the end of the world, and I wouldn't say come to our house because we got the crops growing and the animals there, right? There's not a lot of true livestock on the ranch.
Well, okay, I'll come to your house before the end of the world just to stay at the bed and breakfast that is the Cow We Doin family.
Out, and then when the world ends, go somewhere else. At
Okay,
least,
good to go. I got a few other spots for that, so that sounds good. Um, you and Jeff had a great conversation on this, but you mentioned like the cows look happy and like where your food's coming from. You know the character behind the people raising the livestock, planting and growing that food. And there's something to be said for that because when it comes to noticing, we're really good in the compartmentalized, industrialized nations that we live in of not noticing or intentionally trying to be unaware of where our food is coming from and what look at that cow that you're actually eating before it is slaughtered and tell me how much the FDA regulation behind it is helping make sure your meat is as safe as possible. Regulation is important, and I think these organizations are fantastic in their intent. However, factory farming and where a lot of our food comes from, there are, needless to say, many limitations in that process. So ignoring, or at least not noticing the documentaries that are out there that are willing to show what this does, that can really help change your perspective on what you really want to eat and what aligns with your values in relation to what you want to put in your body or your children's body if you are a parent.
yeah, it's and again, I kind of got into hunting through eating because you see some of these things, and you know what goes on. industrial, food system, right? Even if you're buying at the best butcher shop, right? How the cows are raised, what goes on, how that gets processed along the way, there's a lot of question marks. And I'll be the first to admit that eating, you know, meat you hunt yourself is not accessible for most of the population, whether it's because they can't get out there or, there's no wildlife near where they live or they don't have the space for it, right? It takes some commitment on that end. But I'm very much for one of in the places that you can be very conscientious and choose to notice what you're eating. That investment that you're making in yourself, in your family, and on the planet too, right? Like, people say, "Oh, we can't eat meat; it's ruining the environment." Well, if you have well raised meat, that's in many cases can be very good for agricultural land, right? Many places, the ecosystems evolved with ruminants grazing and being part of that landscape. If you just take that out, which we do in a commercial scale for any commercial agriculture, that's where you run into a lot of, you know, agriculture and ecosystem problems that you have to solve with synthetic fertilizers and other things that, it's a spiral to the bottom in many cases. So I think a lot about it, and that's my, you know, when I was red sauce only, that evolved into radical eating, which is now radical living. But this idea that everything you do is not just a single piece. It's not just one chicken wing that you're eating at dollar wing night or 10-cent wing night. That's a chicken that you just ate. You ate half a chicken. So how do you make sure that that animal was not just, something that became chicken wings, two breasts, two thighs, and dog food? Because that's a sad thing, right? That's no good.
And it takes noticing, and then it takes caring. Some of these things that we talked about, and if you do care a little bit, you may not be able to upturn the system and revolutionize a process that makes more sense for all, but you can play a part in it. And if anything, selfishly, you can influence what's going on to your family's plate and your own plate to live a better life in alignment with what matters to you. Speaking of which, parenting. Um, how old are your kids now? And I'd love to know kind of Lou before becoming a dad and how becoming a father changed you.
Yeah, so my kids, my turn 4 or sorry, 5 and 3 in December. They're one day apart birthdays, and my youngest, the monkey on as he's referred to on Substack, he turns 1 in February. So we've got a young household of kids, right? They're all
A 3 and 1 about to be. And I
yeah.
love the nicknames that you give them on Substack, by the way. It's, very entertaining, Mrs. CWD. It's all great. It just adds more flavor to your writing, which obviously you have plenty of flavor in your writing because you include a lot of these cool recipes that you are doing in relation to the theme that you're writing on. But yeah, becoming a dad, how did that change you? What was Lou like before children? What's Lou like now,
Yeah,
comparatively?
it is. You know, I've I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends, who many of us have kids right around the same age, and I don't necessarily think that being a parent is not necessarily harder than not being a parent, but it's different. And what you have to prioritize is different. So it becomes less about, hey, let's, go off and we're going to spend a weekend, away. It's okay. We're going to still spend that weekend away, but how do we set it up so we can bring our kids and have that be part of our life? And I think, my wife, fortunately, are in alignment on the idea that, we want to, it's not just kids are a part of our life, but kids are part of our life. That sounded better in my head when I was when I was going through it, but it's holistic, right? It's not like there's a segment where it's kids and there's a segment where it's us, and then we're bridging the gap at meals and on weekends. It's kind of all be connected. But it's, a lot of the things that we like to do before kids, we're still trying to do now. But you scale it down, you scaffold it to a different level, and you're not going for, 14-mile hikes in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. You're going for like a mile loop in the woods around our house. And hopefully that builds and grows as the kids build and grow. But I don't know. I do enjoy parenting, and on the flip side, there are a lot of very challenging times, as I've alluded to in my writing recently, right? Where when changes happen with kids, they're so sensitive to these things, and they don't have the emotional regulation to be able to just deal with it. Like, oh, I'm going to go for a workout, right? No, they're going to scream and cry and yell. And how do you deal with that without losing your own patience? Is talk about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Parenting is a good way to do that. you know,
It,
that
it- it's the best area in my life that I have found to do that. And when it comes to fulfilling endeavors, they all require challenge, and nothing has been more fulfilling than parenting. So, like, it's funny talking to my wife about it. She was like, "Hey, what fulfilling thing isn't challenging?" So, of course, parenting has challenge, but she's like, sometimes culturally, I think people talk about how hard parenting is, and it gives like the wrong semblance of what it is. It's so hard because you care so much, and that is so true. Like, we don't stress about things we don't care about,
Yeah.
and we stress the most about things we care the most about. So, stress, I love to reframe that word, is neither good nor bad.
Yep.
This stress, this challenge that we experience is because this is so in alignment with our soul and so important to us that, of course, it's going to be challenging because these little people matter more to me than myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That of, you're it's the challenge of responsibility, but it's a good challenge. It's the not good or bad stress, but it's a state that you have to figure out how to deal. Um, no, I think that's exactly right. You got to make it fun though, right? There's a if you're not having fun, that makes it much harder.
completely agree. There's gonna be hard moments, but what can we do to enjoy? And the fun doesn't have to be this big planned vacation by all means, which we say vacations don't happen anymore, by the way, you alluded to it. They're trips now. But those trips can have a lot of fun within them too. But what you do so well on your ranch is it is show the beauty the beauty and experiences that you can have by just being present, being present with them, noticing them, experiencing their day through their eyes. And your writing that influences me to remember that perspective. Get out of my own head. Don't plan anything. Just go into their world, be present with them, and experience the world through their eyes. And you may experience more awe than you would have if you try to plan this amazing experience elsewhere.
No, I appreciate that because I always am like, I don't want to beat anybody over the head with how to do things because I'm figuring it out. But if I can, convey how I'm thinking about things, if that helps somebody, that's like a it's great to hear. So thank you. I'm glad it resonates.
And it never sounds like you're preaching in any way. You're just noticing, and these noticed moments that provide you with wisdom, which just comes from your own experience. It gives me a perspective to consider trying to add into my life. And all of my favorite accounts on parenting, none of them are telling you tactically what to do. It's always conceptually these things that they notice, and generally speaking, themes that seem to rise up again and again. Erin Miller is one of my favorite ones that writes on parenting. She does the same thing. She's not preaching in any way. She's very contemplative and considering all these different phases of life through perspective, through how do we put the opportunity that is parenting at the forefront to give them the best opportunity to live a fulfilled life. Because sometimes I know I can be guilty of this too. We want them to be happy. We want them to have these enjoyable days. And as you mentioned, they're very emotional. Their brains literally are just core brain right now. They're evolving to have that prefrontal cortex in ration. So to
Yeah.
expect anything other than some intermittent chaos uh, would be silly. It would be insane, actually. And expecting that to change because they just reached a new phase. No, life is never endingly changing these phases. So yeah, they what a great opportunity to practice all of these skills that can make you a better person in the area that matters most to us in our life.
I think how you're writing too, even if it's not directly about parenting, that idea of building resilience through all these different channels, right? It builds on top. You can give some really tactical ways to make your body more resilient, your mind more resilient, and that makes you a better parent, right? It all aligns at the end of the day, right? It's not just hey, I'm gonna parent, I'm gonna work out, and I'm gonna write, and I'm gonna work. You gotta, I do think you got to look at everything holistically, and how do you I'm gonna steal Matt, from the original, like, look at life with your eyes wide open, because if you're not and you're just focusing on one track, you miss so much, you don't notice those things.
That's what I'm trying to do all the time through self experimentation and then sharing what may be possible. Because again, I think these concepts can translate. I think resilience is a skill that you can, like, it's always interesting to see these exceptional businessmen or women or exceptional athletes or just exceptional people in a specific domain be train wrecks in other areas of their life. And there's many reasons for it. But you can see someone be exceptionally resilient and clearly have all of the capabilities of showing up well in another domain that is apparently important to them, but not being able to. So like the skills are there, but they're not translating well, and there are a variety of reasons for it. But it's something that I is at the forefront of my focus every day. So like when I train, I love the byproducts of physical training. I love the delayed gratification of any challenging endeavor that I do during nap time. Even talking in public to a buddy on Substack right now when my kids are sleeping. I love all of this because of selfishly what it does for me, but selflessly, the intent behind all of it is aligning with my number one priorities, which would be showing up as a husband and father, and then showing up in the Navy for my job, but just showing up for the world, my community, to be the best man that I can be. So, what can I do to make myself better, selflessly and selfishly,
Yeah,
aligning all of that? And I
yeah,
love how you said with children, just so I don't forget it, alignment in your activities to involve them, and it's absolutely. Do you have to change how you do it? For sure. Is it worth the stress and the modifications? 100%. And your hikes may be just a mile right now instead of the 14-mile one, but you'll be able to do the 14-mile hike with your family because you've modified back further now. Just like with physical exercise, if you want to squat 200 pounds and you can't even get up 50 right now, you need to modify down and
yeah,
get in the arena there for a bit and build up to that. And that's what we're doing with our kids by involving them in our lives. And so every opportunity you can to have them involved, worthwhile challenge to take on.
yeah. No, you gotta, it's gotta be all, you gotta have them be part of it. And it's a disservice to you, it's a disservice to them, and to be spent time with.
When it comes to noticing, to kind of wrap things up as we hit an hour, um, you apply that so well to nature, but you also apply it to your children. Has that skill, have you changed how you look at people and or just like your ability to be fully present when it comes to your children?
It's funny, it's one of those self-fulfilling things where the more I think I've been writing about it, the more I've noticed when I'm not doing it. So I really try, and again, that's like sometimes it's even little things like making sure the phone is in a different room, or, this screens off, or distractions, eliminate distractions so you can, get down an eye level. And I think it's, the that I try and do more is not let my sense of ego or embarrassment get in the way of interacting with my kids. Like if they're doing something silly, like, "Daddy, come dance with me," right? Like it doesn't matter what I look like. That's the time that I can spend with my kids and do that in a, way that's fun for both of us. You can't think about if someone's looking through the window like, "What are you doing?" We having my kids, right? So just, and I think that to bring it back to like the authenticity and the sense of self, like if you don't have that authentic grounding, it's harder to do those things. So it all builds from that foundation, that sense of rootedness in who you are. You need to have that, I think, before you can, notice things. But if you're not noticing things about yourself, how can you notice it in others?
Yeah. And then you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone for the most
Yep.
important values in your life and do those silly things with your kids because it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Even more so, like you're willing to step into these weird realms for the greatest purpose ever, and that's the reason to expand your comfort zone to
Yep.
get better for what aligns with your values. And if you ever need ideas on how to do that, the best show in the world would be Bluey. So Bandit, Bandit is it's an unrealistic example. I don't know if my dude has a job or what he does for a living because he's always around playing. However, when it comes to playing with your kids, I've never seen a better example on television. Thankfully, my kids like that show, but I'm always like, man, Bandit has it figured out. Exactly what you're talking about. He's willing to do all of it and more.
Yeah, that's one of the only shows that we watch, because we don't do a ton of TV, we don't do a ton of streaming, but Bluey is, like, guaranteed, and I get such a kick out of it, and my wife and I joke. I think that show, more than any I've seen, like, nails parenting and, like, kids, and I love it specifically because look at their car, it's a mess. I'm like, "That's exactly what the back of my truck looks like." The food, not, it's very good, and Bandit is, he's I 'cause I looked up, it's like, what does he do? He's a archaeologist. He's a dog that digs bones. It's perfect. It's so good.
Oh, that's awesome. But yeah, the skill that is presence and like stepping into your kids' worlds, those parents have it dialed in. It's a wonderful show. I'm glad my kids like it. I had no idea anything about it until I started watching it recently. And yeah, they have that dialed in. And if there's any living human being that seems to be close to Bandit, it's you and your writing. So keep practicing that skill, and I'll keep doing my best to
That's the
read it.
hardest thing. It's just
What?
doing a children's dog, and I'm trying an Australian Heel Wild Show. But you know what? I'm gonna print that out and put it on my wall.
There you go. I'm gonna send you a picture with your face on Bandit's body. Brother, this was awesome. I could talk to you about, and we have a lot of overlap, of course, in our lives, for how we approach different things, but whether it's fatherhood, whether it's living, it's funny. Like I'm actively trying to be more present in nature. I feel like I'm pretty good when it comes to noticing things in people, and that aligns quite a bit with what I do for a living. Becoming an audiologist and working with people and noticing different things about what they say in case histories, and I'm an extroverted individual, and that's been something I've been pretty good at throughout my life is noticing people and when they deviate from a baseline, maybe need support or different aspects of the human element, but the natural element and being alone with myself and noticing the world around me. That's something that your writing really encourages in me, and so many other things just adds perspective to my life. So thank you so much for what you do. This has been an absolute pleasure.
No, likewise. This was a blast. Like I said, we could probably talk another hour at least, and still have tons to riff on. But I'm very appreciative of your writing, Kyle, and what you do. So it's good. We'll do it again, right? I'd love to do it, but
100%. Yep. I look for. I'll share the stuff you and Jeff are doing, and without question, we'll do it again.
yeah, for sure, man. Well, I hope your kids get a little bit of more naps so you can get some work done, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, brother. Take care.